Now, amid stark warnings from the US and the UK about the increased risk of terror attacks on Abuja and across Nigeria, and the powerfully destructive clout of the floods that have submerged large parts of this country, how seriously should we be taking the promises from the presidential candidates aimed at the electorate as they struggle to focus on the issues and the bigger threats that are heading this way or are already here? Well, I have two guests with me for the rest of the program who will give us their personal take on the news and the issues of the day. Our outside guest is the public policy analyst, Chibuzo Okereke. And with me also is our in-house Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmud Jega. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Let me start with you, Chibuzo, since you're our outside guest. You were listening avidly to Festus Keyamo there, talking about the fact that this election is a referendum on the APC and what they've done so far to justify the Nigerian people voting them back into power. What are your thoughts on what he said?
Well, I agree with him that first it's a referendum on the APC, but also listening to him, I felt that he simply believes Nigeria is a sum total of political parties, but that's not correct. Nigeria is more than APC, PDP, and the Labour Party. There are people of Nigeria, citizens, who are affected by the flood, by insecurity, by the unemployment. In fact, when you asked him about what his candidate is going to do about employment in Nigeria, especially when the figures are going high, and he's talking about ramping up revenue, we didn't get specifics, as to how unemployment issue will be addressed, and probably the figures we're looking at. And this is what is key to political party management and manifesto drafting. You must be able to put figure to test and say, this is what I'm working towards. This is the strategy to achieve those specifics. So for me, I think that a lot more work needs to be done. When we talk about referendum, we have to look at other intervening variables. How, mobilized are Nigerians to actually participate in that referendum? Because if it's just about the parties and what we do in the urban centers without really getting to the people, because you still have ethnicity, you have religion, you have other, primordial considerations playing into what we call a referendum. So how effective, or efficient or result-centered is this referendum going to be? And that is where other institutions of government need to do a lot of work to say, if we say APC have not gotten it right, and democracy is about the people, we then need to have the people express this their will through the ballot. So Nigeria, we are concerned. That's why I said it's not about PDP criticizing APC. What about the Nigerian people? What are those concerns? Everything is not politics.
No,
at a time, there has to be governance, where you look at how are the policies, how is the government, how has it fared in terms of imparting the citizens. So if your GDP is going up to 3.5, what does that even mean?
Yeah, how does that translate into,
decent housing to the people? Has he improved, lifted people out of poverty? These are key considerations you have to make. And you really need to study it and put figure to test before, we can agree that there will be a difference.
Well, Mahmud Jega, you were listening to that as well. And the honest truth is that however we would like to have things be different, and this is not unique to Nigeria, elections are not only a referendum on the party in power, but it's also the parties fighting amongst each other. They're fighting for the votes, so they're sniping at each other all the time.
And it's true. You see, I listened also to Festus Keyamo's interview. To be fair to him, there wasn't enough time really to explain the whole detail, because the Asiwaju manifesto that was released last Friday is 80 pages. In fairness.
That's why we just picked one thing, one that relates to him, because he's the employment minister.
Exactly. So it did cover other areas. He started from the issue of raising the revenue profile, and he went rather dangerously for a campaigning candidate to say that the oil subsidy must be removed. You know, it's the most sensitive issue in Nigeria. I mean, I agree entirely that this is a colossal national waste to be spent in trillions of naira. And there was even the part of the discussion between you where it was said that government say the poor people do not gain. I think, to be precise, it is not that the poor people do not gain, but the rich people gain more than, because if all you gain is that you pay a low transport fare from here to Nyanya, the person who has 10 cars in his house, you know, gains a lot more. I think that's the argument that the government has been making, but which most Nigerians do not accept.
Yeah, but if you remove that subsidy and put in public transport, which is a lot less than what you're going to pay, what you're going to get back from the subsidy. You see what I mean? You can just eliminate the fact that the poor people are going to lose something as a result of it. You see what I mean? Maybe that's the bottom line, really.
Maybe that was what Mr. Kiamo was saying about putting some measures in place. Of course, you are right. I mean,
you got to put cushions in place.
There have to be some cushions. But then about the issue of the referendum, of course, it's not the normal referendum that people do.
Yes.
We are saying that it's a referendum on the APC government that has been ruling for 7.5 years now. So people, but then Mr. Kiamo also made the important point that yes, you do a referendum on the government, but it also depends on the options that you have. And really, that's what it is in an election. Probably the most ideal person to be president of Nigeria is sitting somewhere in his house, and he is not offering himself for election. So you can't vote for him, I mean, if he is ideal. So
well, I'll vote for you, Mahmud.
So we have to choose.
Based on your analysis, I'll vote for you.
So we have to choose among, and there was another important point that, okay, promises are very important. These manifestos that the political parties are bringing out, but you also must judge the manifesto alongside a person's track record. Because you see, even if 2 or 3 people promise you the same thing as a voter, you still have to decide which one of them is more likely to deliver on the promise. I mean, because anybody can make a promise. So what was your previous record? But people have to judge for themselves among all the candidates who is likely to make the best promise and is also more likely to deliver on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me come to you, Chibuzo. Let's turn to the big news stories of the moment. One of them, of course, the big security alert issued by the US, the UK, and other European governments about the threat of a terror attack on Abuja and elsewhere. How seriously do you think the government and the presidential campaigns, the candidates, are taking this?
Yeah, you know, and that is going back to what Dr. Joseph said. You know, the idea that the ruling party will decide to run away from the performance of the party and pitch with the comparative analysis of the options that we have for the election, that already calls for an issue, because traditionally, if you have superb performance, you are going to ride on it and be shouting it, you know, everywhere. So I think this is very serious, and we have to look at the challenges of insecurity. All this intelligence has been coming over the years, and the issue has been how have we been able to use it, you know, to track these things and, you know, stop it. So, but the challenge also is, I wonder sometimes if our governance experience is totally different from what is happening elsewhere in the world. In most other crimes, you're going to have a TAC team that is on standby briefing the people, whether it's about flooding or insecurity. You have a coordinated effort from the local government down to the federal. And when you look at a situation where most of these attacks, except now that is getting to urban centers heavily, then you see government responsiveness. Now, but again, we are supposed to be pragmatic, not reactionary. We need to make the local government to work, because the attacks that are going on in the local government every day, in the rural areas every day, that are unreported, there are too many. So I have not seen, you know, apart from the usual press releases and what have you, I need the president to be frontal. The president, as unfortunately, when he said this job is tough, he can't wait to go home, I think a lot of things have gone wrong since that time. That didn't inspire hope. Maybe he will need to retract that statement and say, look, I'm here and I'm going to lead from the front till the May 29th next year when I'm going to handovers. We need a more compact, a tag team that is coordinated from the sub-national to the federal level to show seriousness and commitment of government. Because sometimes all you need is to inspire the people that, look, this intelligence is here. We're having threats of terrorism and what have you, but A, B, C, D are being done to ensure that things are, okay.
Well, in fairness to them, the police have issued a statement saying that they're closely studying that thing that has happened and are acting on the intelligence that they have available
between the police and the people. This is the truth. And police has not been able to reconstruct their image for many years. Now, it should come from the president himself. He needs to inspire hope. He needs to talk about some of these intelligence reports. He needs to, mobilize the people, as citizens, because the security agents, for instance, will not be able to do this. Today we have policemen in churches, in mosques, in SPU, following politicians, and what have you. Where are really the personnel to be able to track?
Let me bring Mahmud Jega in, because, I mean, you have to wonder, Mahmud, why this type of intelligence always comes from foreign embassies. Yeah, and why it is that the so-called cooperation with them, they don't give it to the government, and then the government gives it to us. You see what I mean?
You said trust deficits are between us and our security agencies. There is also a trust deficit between us and the foreign embassies, because they don't do this in their own countries. You see, I remember a book that I read many years ago. It was called The Fifth Horseman. It was faction, about that time. The Libyan leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, was alleged to have planted a bomb, nuclear bomb in New York City. But, reading the book, you get a good idea of the American security arrangement. And there was a debate in their Security Council that, look, this bomb is in New York City. Should we just announce that there is a nuclear bomb in New York City and everybody should run? And the director of the FBI said, if you announce, if the bomb goes off, it will kill 1 million people. But if you announce that there is a bomb and people should run, it will kill 5 million people. So actually there are certain things that you should better, like all this now. Why won't, if they have concrete intelligence like that, why can't they give it to our government? Why should you announce it and make everybody jittery? Like today, we were preparing to send my children to school. The school quickly sent a message and said they have started the midterm break. Don't bring the children. And I'm sure it is in response to this. But they don't do this in their own countries. And they have all kinds of security threats from Al Qaeda and the others. So honestly, it is not the best thing to do.
Well, in fairness to them, they raise threat levels in their countries, like in the UK and so on, when there's a credible threat. But I agree with you in the sense that I think there ought to be greater cooperation in terms of intelligence between the government, the Nigerian government, and these foreign embassies, if they have that intelligence. I mean, you would think that they would say, well, here's the intelligence, act upon it. But I imagine, Chibuzo, that one of the reasons why they put it out there is that they themselves don't have much confidence in the Nigerian system, but also, secondly, that they issue a broad warning to people to stay away from certain places. They're not doing the job of the governments. They're just saying, we need to let you know that there is a credible threat, so be careful how you move around.
Well, the issue is there are a lot of protocols and treaties that have been signed and cooperation document on these things. So when a foreign government begins to now lead the charge, maybe if you interrogate it more deeply, you may even discover this may have been communicated a while ago. And the kind of presence that is needed from the government didn't happen, and they decide to do that. That it could also be global politics and power play. So there are a lot of variables, in play. But what is important is that these people are able to do this. Then you begin to ask questions about our foreign policy, our diplomatic relations, and other aspects of governance that may be suffering. And this is the reason I said the government should not focus more on what the opposition is saying about them. You are interested in leaving a legacy for the optics. That is not important. You leave a legacy for the people, and the people will remember you. And it's not true that we cannot judge a government for the presence, for posterity or history. No, we can assess how a government has performed, for the now. So the Nigerian government needs to stand up and say, come on, some of these intelligence reports you are issuing, they are causing, more damage.
Right.
It's affecting the confidence of people, affecting businesses. If I look at what Doc said now about the school, many schools today are being used for a place, IDP for flood victims. That means the students are not even there. And then you issue a security intelligence of this nature, then everything is in comatose.
Yes, but let me say this, Mahmud Jega, because I mean, again, as Chibuzo said, we don't know the backstory. I mean, we don't know what's going on sort of behind the headlines, but we know that Nigeria was said to have had credible intelligence, and when the Kuje prison incident took place, but they didn't act upon it. And we don't know where that intelligence came from, whether or not it's the foreign people who said, well, look, we've got this intelligence, and they didn't act upon it. I mean, but that's another point. I mean, the other big issue here is that all this suggests that there's still big insecurity everywhere. Abuja still potentially insecure, and contrary to what the government has been saying, the terrorists still have the capacity to launch such attacks. So the tectonic plates of terrorism have not in fact shifted, have they?
No, there's no doubt that insecurity is still very prevalent. In fact, the country's #1 problem. And it is also impacting very badly on our economic recovery efforts, because when millions of people cannot go to the farm, many people do not want to travel, people are insecure even in their own houses, and then to add to it, there are all these terror threat,
and they mentioned hotels, and here we are.
Well, if information is not very specific, it is not really very useful. You cannot say we should avoid all crowded places, including markets and hotels, churches everywhere. How can we? Then what is the use of living if we can't go to all those places? But if you have very specific information, even the one that you mentioned about the Kuje prison, I doubt if the government had clear information that the Kuje prison, maybe there was some information that the terrorists will launch an attack, but that's an everyday problem that we face right now. And I think from what I can see by reading the newspapers, and there has been some little progress caused especially by the Air Force bombing of bandit and terrorist camps in some parts of the country. It seems to have reduced, because you can imagine like the Kaduna-Abuja highway, where we used to have almost daily attacks. Now I keep monitoring it because I want to follow the road, and I think for more than a month now.
Have you been on that road recently?
No, not recently, but every day I ask those who ply the road, what is the situation? And they say, the road is very bad, but so far there has been no attack. But
so that suggests that there'd been some
there
success.
Has been some success.
Yeah.
Some, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Chibuzo, let me ask you this, because you are a public policy analyst, and you watch particularly things around this election. I mean, what impression are you getting about how things are going, broadly speaking, with these elections? You've now had the candidates, they put out their manifestos, at least the front line, most of the frontline ones. What direction do you see things going? What's your overall assessment of the campaign going into the elections?
Well, I think that the campaign is very important, one, and also we started, in fact, I was the person during the high-level forum on political communication that made that suggestion that it's important the candidates are made to sign a code, you know, on issue-based campaign. Because when the campaigns are not issue-based, the people are being defrauded, and democracy witnesses a repression. So with the signing of that code, unfortunately, I think we have gone 10 steps back, because we have now seen the candidate, you know, breaching the very provisions of the very first issue-based campaign code that they signed ahead of the peace accord. But one thing also that has come out clearly in this campaign is the fact that there were expectations on manifesto. You know, people were expecting, you know, to see manifestos. Where media were asking, when is your manifesto going to come out on this? So you could see that the candidate started working on putting something out there, unlike before, that people can hold on to. But there's been a very significant departure that is even of concern to me, and is the fact that we are now witnessing individual manifestos rather than party manifestos. And that is a big concern in this election. So people look at and say, for instance, the APC manifesto in 2015, 2019, where are we in it, and what is in this one? Is it a brand new manifesto because of what Kayamo called the personnel, the person that is leading? But it's actually the party that is sponsoring, because that will help to deepen political party administration, you know, in Nigeria. So this is what I have, you know, been able to observe. Also, of course, the interest of Nigerians to but of course, in every transition, you see this enormous enthusiasm about the election. But how that will bring about change is what is key. Another thing is the new, the P2B, the obedient movement that seemed to have disrupted, you know, the system whereby individuals now use their personal money to fund campaign activities in their community and local area, unlike what we are used to, where a candidate of a party will be taxed, you know, completely out of bank and pocket to pay for T-shirts, sponsor you to stadium for his rally, and even pay you for shouting, you know, at the rally. So these are new things, you know, for our democracy that is very, very important. But what is even more important is that the candidate must stay on issues.
Right.
We must stay on issue of insecurity, state, all the national questions that are before us.
Right.
A candidate must take a position. State police, restructuring, true federalism, constitutional amendment, gender.
In fairness to the APC, I mean, their manifesto actually looks at all of that, including issues of federalism and so on and so forth. But a final word from you, Mahmud Jega, because we've got a couple of minutes or so, or less actually, before we have to go.
Oh, on these matters, well, you know, what he said about the manifestos becoming individual now instead of party, I think it reflects the character of the political parties of this republic. And because, you know, for example, if you say PDP or if you say APC in Nigeria right now politically, it really means different things to different people in different states. There is no common program between the federal government and any state government, or between one state government and another, even if they belong to the same political party, not to mention local government. So it's not the ideal situation, because even as late as the Second Republic, the political parties had a uniform program, which, whether it is they are controlling federal or any state government, you expect them generally to adhere to that program, despite, of course, the individual differences between states and local governments. So it's too late to have that arrangement in this in this election season, but we hope they will work towards that in the future.
Okay, and on that note, Mahmud Jega and Chibuzo Okereke, thank you very much indeed.